Hey everyone, welcome back to Cheddar. A week after big tech CEOs took on Congress, New York State Senator Mike Gianaris introduced his own antitrust law aimed at making it easier to sue tech giants over an alleged monopoly of power. That state senator joins me now. Senator Gianaris, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time here with us today. First, tell us exactly what your bill does and what the intentions are.
Well, what we're trying to do is bring New York's antitrust laws into the 21st century, because the last time these were written were about 100 years ago for a totally different economy, totally different problems that existed. And it doesn't fit adequately to the problems that have been created now in the current environment. You have now, for example, big companies that are dominating these markets and acting in an anti-competitive fashion unilaterally. In New York, we can't bring action against a company for monopolistic practices unless there's a conspiracy or a collaboration among multiple parties, whether it be price fixing or bid rigging or what have you. But what we're seeing now is companies that have just become so big that they are taking actions by themselves that are anti-competitive. They can undercut competitors' prices to the point where they are incurring a loss for a short period of time just to run people out of business. We're seeing it in the sense of these markets that are dominated in many different aspects by one company. So, for example, you go and you run a search on Google or Amazon or what have you, and there's been a lot of questions about the prioritization of the search results. And so if you're not a favored company, or if you're a competitor, you end up much lower on those results than, for example, we just saw one report that said that 60% of Google search results circle back to Google products. And so obviously that has an anti-competitive consequence. Right now, there's
Right.
not a lot we can do to bring enforcement in those circumstances, and we're trying to make the law more adaptable to that
And,
circumstance.
and so for the timing, walk us through that because are you confident that this can get passed before the end of the session because of where the national conversations are headed right now?
But it's a good question. We're trying to move as fast as we can while also being mindful that this is a very complex issue. So I'm in the process of talking to interested parties on all sides to make sure the law is as tight as it can be. We're working very closely with the New York Attorney General's office, who is very much in support of our efforts here. And so whether it's, technically our session ended in June, but because of the pandemic, we've been periodically returning almost on a monthly basis. So we'll be back again before the end of the year. We'll certainly be back in January in earnest for weekly sessions. So whether it happens in the next couple of months or shortly thereafter, I'm optimistic we're going to get something done on this important issue.
I wonder what your take on the hearings that we saw just 2 weeks ago within that range was. And were you confident with what you heard from some of the tech CEOs, Jeff Bezos, Sundar Pichai? Of course, we were watching as Tim Cook who was prepared. It seemed that all of them were defending their companies, but were you confident with the defense that they gave and the reasoning that they gave?
Well, it's an interesting way to phrase the question. I'm confident that they know exactly what they're doing. What struck me was how brazen they were in almost admitting behavior that's inappropriate, whether it was the purchase of Instagram specifically because they're a competitor and wanted to take them off the board, or I believe it was Amazon that talked about their relationship with third parties and the exchange of information that may have been inappropriate. These companies have become so big and so powerful, they don't even think twice about doing things that should be regulated and regulated more aggressively. And they're sitting here before Congress just admitting it's all true as if it's part of their normal business practice, because in fact it is. And that's exactly why we need to change the laws federally. They're having the hearings, they're doing what they need to do there, but the states have an important role to play here as well, particularly a state like New York that is one of those that has so much economic activity happening within our borders that what we do sets the tone for the rest of the country. And on an issue of this importance, I think we need to step up and do that.
And all of these companies, in some capacity or another, they also have operations in New York City or just New York in general. I wonder, were you able to have any talks with the companies that we're discussing prior to rolling out this new antitrust law and this new bill?
Well, like I mentioned, we are in the process of having ongoing conversations. I have talked to some industry representatives, and we're continuing to do that. But they have to come to the table recognizing that we believe something needs to be done. If they want to have input as to how to do it most effectively, that's one thing. But we've gotten some initial reactions that are just along the lines of don't do anything because this would be bad for us, meaning big tech. Obviously, we're doing this specifically because we believe there are elements of this these big tech giants that are a problem for their competitors, for consumers, and for our country as a whole. And we're trying to deal with the fact that this unprecedented concentration of power in just a few hands, which is inevitably dangerous. It's dangerous to our economy, and it's dangerous to our politics.
For New Yorkers who, if the law goes into play, if they were to sue, what would the remedies be, and what does the bill kind of seek in terms of punitive damage or compensatory damage? Line that up for us.
Well, there's a couple of different things. First and foremost, I would expect most of the enforcement to be done in the hands of the Attorney General of the state. And they have great experience in bringing antitrust actions. That's why they are intimately involved in the drafting of this legislation. The penalties will be stepped up from what they currently are under antitrust laws, and in extreme cases, there would be criminal sanctions available as well. We do also create this opportunity to have class actions or civil actions brought, and those penalties would be relative to the damage done and what a trial may determine. So that's still something that we're developing. Like I said, we have a bill that's introduced. I expect by the time everyone has input into it, the language in it will change somewhat. What's important is we started this conversation. I don't expect it to be a terribly long conversation, and hopefully we'll get something done in the next few months.
You've been a vocal critic of Amazon in the past, led the charge to get them to drop their plans for a headquarters in Long Island City, Queens. And so when you think about Amazon specifically and the powers that company has, what are you looking for in terms of change in a fast-paced environment that we do operate in, where you've seen Amazon continue to grow? What is it specifically about this company?
Well, we need regulation. We need greater regulation against all of these companies. Amazon's often at the forefront because they're very high profile in what they do, and they're very brazen in what they do. But some of this, a lot of it is the economic power that's concentrated, but inevitably that bleeds into political power. And that gets extremely dangerous when you have companies whose primary motivation is profit, when you have them playing the role of shadow governments, dictating to governments how much they want in benefits, threatening governments, as they did in Seattle, that if they choose to impose some kind of revenue generation mechanism to deal with the homeless crisis that they're facing, that they threaten to leave the entire city. I mean, these are the kinds of actions that are very dangerous for policymaking if we allow that kind of power to be held by so few. Like I said, Amazon has been in the news more than the others on it, but it's a problem across the board, whether it's Facebook, Amazon, Google, you name it. They all have this incredible power over all of us now that is not the way it's supposed to be. People elect their leaders to make decisions for them. They don't cede that power to the biggest companies in the land, and that's why we have antitrust laws to begin with. We just need to make them better and more modern.
And what kind of backup are you looking for from the federal government, just very quickly while we have you?
Well, I mean, who knows? This federal government's a bit of a mess. And so you can never tell from one day to the next whether they're going to bring enforcement in cases like this or not. It seems like a lot of the times it's from this administration, it's personal. Donald Trump doesn't like something the Washington Post says about him. He decides to go after Jeff Bezos, but doesn't seem to be based on the policies and on the merits the way it should be. And so I'm certainly hopeful that they do something. They have more authority. They have more power than state governments do. I don't have a lot of confidence in this administration. Hopefully there'll be a new one in just a few months. We can see what they're likely to do. But in the meantime, my responsibility is as a state lawmaker to make sure our state is prepared to fill that void if it exists, and right now it does.
All right, New York State Senator, kind enough to take the time with us today, Michael Gianaris. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.